Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating journey, how a project management office, or PMO, transforms from a simple everyday support function into a massive strategic value partner. For so long, PMOs have honestly struggled to prove their worth. They get viewed as administrative overhead rather than actual drivers of organizational success. But, well, that landscape is changing rapidly. So today, we're going to explore the critical mindset shift you need to move away from those rigid, pre-packaged methodologies and instead build a dynamic, value-driven PMO that your executives literally cannot live without.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, the PMO identity crisis. 2, diagnosing real customer needs. 3, customer-defined value. 4, navigating organizational maturity. And finally, number 5, scaling from support to strategic partner. Let's dive right in.
Okay, I want to kick things off with this absolutely brilliant idea paraphrased from Peter Drucker because it perfectly sets the stakes for why technical perfection without strategic alignment is, well, completely useless. Think about it. There are countless PMOs out there doing a fantastic technical job. They're building gorgeous templates, they're implementing complex software, enforcing strict governance, the whole shebang. But if those technically perfect outputs aren't solving a real, deeply felt pain within the organization, they're essentially worthless. Excellence in the wrong area is just a recipe for frustration and a massive lack of perceived value.
Section 1, the PMO identity crisis. It's kind of wild when you look at the history. PMOs have been discussed since the 1970s, but notice how the modern value-driven frameworks have literally just been cemented. For decades, the industry evolved so slowly. But then, you have the Dubai municipality winning consecutive global awards in 2021 and 2022 for their highly adaptable models. And then, the Project Management Institute acquires the PMO Global Alliance in 2023. The industry is finally rallying around standardized practices that prioritize customer-centric value over those rigid historical models. So often, people think they just need to grab a rigid PMO model right off the shelf, like picking a cereal. You might think, ooh, let's grab the enterprise PMO box, or hey, let's rebrand as a value management office. But trying to force your unique organization's messy, complex problems into a predefined, generic box, that's almost always going to lead to a lot of resistance. You should absolutely draw inspiration from these models for sure. But how can a generic framework created by an outside consultant perfectly solve your company's highly specific pains? Spoiler alert, it can't.
It's literally the classic tale of the blindfolded man and the elephant. What a PMO looks like depends entirely on where you happen to be standing and what your specific needs are. One blindfolded person touches the elephant's trunk and thinks, oh, it's a snake. Another touches the tail and thinks it's a worm. Who's right? Actually, they all are, from their own perspective. In your company, your IT department might view the PMO as a strict governance enforcer, while the marketing team sees it as this agile support hub. The PMO isn't just one singular thing. It's a custom solution built to address diverse perspectives all across the business.
Section 2, diagnosing real customer needs. Now, imagine walking into a clinic with an intense, terrible stomachache, and before you even open your mouth to speak, the doctor happily hands you a state-of-the-art box of heart medication. I mean, it might be the absolute best medicine in the world, heavily researched, technically perfect, but you don't have a heart problem. That is exactly what happens when you push an unrequested reporting methodology onto an executive whose actual pain is simply needing reliable data for a Tuesday board meeting. We have to stop pushing prepackaged services and start listening to the actual pain.
So who exactly are we diagnosing here? Well, in this context, your customers aren't external buyers. They are your internal leaders, your project managers, your functional managers. Just like an HR department has internal clients, the PMO is an internal service provider. And this is crucial. The survival of your PMO is directly weighed against their satisfaction. If you don't understand their unique everyday demands and frustrations, the scales are going to tip entirely against you. If you aren't actually diagnosing those internal leaders, you really need to take a hard look at your current outputs and ask yourself this critical question. Those massive portfolio spreadsheets, the mandatory training sessions, the endless bi-weekly governance meetings, who actually asked for them? Did you put them in place because your customers expressed a real pain that those tools solve? Or did you do it simply because some textbook said a PMO should do these things?
Section 3, value is customer defined. Now, there is a massive difference between delivery and recognition. Let's say value delivery is giving an executive a beautiful strategic portfolio map.
You might spend 3 solid months building an incredible dashboard that perfectly connects every project to strategic goals. And in your eyes, you've delivered massive value, right? But value recognition only happens if that anxious executive actually trusts your map enough to make better decisions. If they still second-guess things during board meetings because they don't trust the numbers, then in their eyes, you haven't delivered anything at all. You might think your PMO's outputs are technically gorgeous, but ultimately, value, just like beauty, is determined entirely by the beholder. What actually constitutes value changes drastically depending on the company culture, the industry, and the specific individual you're talking to. For some executives, value is strictly measured in ROI and dollars saved. For others, it's about prestige, visibility, or honestly, just peace of mind, knowing they won't look foolish in front of the board. You have to tailor your perception of value to perfectly match theirs. But this brings up a really fascinating dilemma. What do you do when you can clearly see the organization needs a highly sophisticated strategic solution, but the stakeholders are resistant, totally overwhelmed, or just asking for basic tactical support? Section 4. Navigating organizational maturity. To answer that dilemma, we have to look closely at the psychological readiness of the organization. Think about it like this. Offer an adult and a 3-year-old child a choice between the keys to a real Ferrari parked outside or a plastic remote-controlled toy Ferrari. The adult grabs the real keys immediately, of course. But the child? They genuinely want the toy. If you try to force the real keys onto the child, arguing about monetary value and V8 engines, they're just going to get upset. Many PMOs are dealing with organizational children when it comes to project maturity. You can't push the real Ferrari yet. You have to meet them where they are, give them the tactical support they can actually absorb, and slowly raise them up to understand strategic value. And because maturity varies so much, you should think of your PMO kind of like an audio mixing board. You shouldn't operate under a single locked setting across the whole company. You might slide the directive fader all the way up to take direct control of a complex IT integration, simply because that team needs strict governance. Meanwhile, you might just push the supportive dial up a little bit for the sales department when they land a big client. You have to tune your approach to the exact maturity and needs of each specific department.
Section 5. Support to strategic partner.
So how do we take all these concepts and actually scale them into a recognized strategic partnership? Creating this kind of alignment definitely takes effort. Specifically, it involves the 10 steps of the value-generating PMO flywheel, which is outlined in the PMI PMO practice guide. Now, this framework isn't just a one-and-done checklist. It's a continuous customer experience cycle designed to keep the PMO perpetually aligned with the business. Let's look at the core of this. You absolutely must trace the path from initial customer needs all the way down to recognized trust. It starts with identifying the real pain, finding that stomach ache. Then you design a service specifically for that pain. The service generates an output, like a customized report. That report leads to an outcome, like executives making faster resource allocations. When those outcomes consistently solve the initial pain, the customer realizes a benefit. They feel relief. And when enough internal customers realize those benefits, that is when you earn unwavering organizational trust. Moving this massive wheel is really heavy at first. In the beginning, they're going to deal with skepticism, resistance, and a lack of maturity. It takes immense effort to secure those first few wins. But as you successfully guide a few pilot teams through that value chain and they start championing your work to the rest of the company, the wheel starts turning on its own. Your PMO transitions naturally from a tactical support team sweating to push the wheel to a highly sought-after strategic partner just riding the momentum. And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway. You cannot simply hammer on the door and demand respect from your executives. Slapping a fancy strategic value management office label on your door just doesn't work. True value is about doing the quiet, complex work of untangling the mess to find the exact key that solves their specific pains. When they finally look at the PMO and think, I don't know exactly how they do it, but I know we cannot survive without them, that is when you have truly succeeded. So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought for your own organization. Are you actively listening to your customers to build real strategic value? Or are you just polishing the toy Ferrari? Take a step back from your rigid methodologies, look your internal customers in the eye, and make sure the medicine you are prescribing is actually healing their deepest pains. Thanks for exploring this journey with us, and keep striving for that genuine, value-driven impact.